Hello there, and welcome to What's the Point? A question we should all be asking ourselves, and the podcast by brand architect Bill Ellis that will help you discover, clarify, and live your purpose.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to What's the Point? I've got another interesting, fabulous guest today. He is the founder and CEO of Koita Milk. Please welcome Mustafa Koita.
Thanks, Bill. Happy to be here.
It's such an honor to have you here. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So Mustafa is an American expat living in Dubai for over 15 years. He's got a tremendously interesting story about how he got from his birthplace in New Jersey, growing up for the most part, I believe, in Chicago, being educated here in the U.S. And then from there, there's a whole lot of stuff. And suddenly he's in Dubai, in the milk business, if you will. So let's start with this, Mustafa. Give us the overview, please, of Koita Milk. What is Koita Milk? What is the premise?
Sure. So Koita was started about 9 years ago. I founded it in Dubai with the idea of helping families eat healthier. And we're basically most well known for 3 lines of milk. All of them are produced in the north of Italy, under the Italian Alps. And they are organic dairy milk, lactose-free dairy milk, and plant-based milk. And we are headquartered in Dubai, and we sell or export to 10 different countries now, including also the United States.
Well, that's really, really impressive. And, one more thing about the milk that I find interesting, because it's somewhat unfamiliar to me, because I don't see it much in the States, but your milk and the packaging make it shelf stable. So it's got a very long life. And still 100% organic and all natural. Explain how that works.
Sure. So to preserve milk or make it shelf stable and have a shelf life of, say, 6 or 8 months, you don't have to add any artificial additives. In fact, there's a heat process called UHT, where you heat the milk up to a high temperature, cool it down to a cool temperature to kill all the germs, and then it's sealed in an airtight aseptic Tetra Pak. And that full light barrier and aseptic, air tightness is what allows the milk to retain its shelf life.
Okay, well, that's good to learn. Always learning.
A little bit of Milk 101.
Milk 101 and Packaging 101, both very interesting. But let's get away from your current focus, which is milk, and let me take a little bit of a journey with you back to more of your childhood here in the States, and what that was like, and just give us a sense, a flavor of your younger years.
Sure. I'll try and give you the 5-minute version of it. But essentially, I was first generation Indian origin kid. My father was brought up in Bombay, moved to the US in the 60s. I was born in Princeton, New Jersey. So don't hold that against me. And essentially spent most of my life in Chicago, in the suburbs of Chicago. I'd say middle class, upper middle class sort of environment. As a Indian kid, my path was sort of destined to, get good grades, as my father was always drilling that into me, and go to a good school and become an accountant or a doctor. That was sort of an Indian parent's sort of dream come true. And I had a little bit of a different path. When I was 13, my mother passed away. It was a bit of a traumatic experience for me. One of those challenges that ended up turning into something that I was able to pull a lot of strength from, later on in life. And, got really bad grades, didn't go to the Ivy League school, and kind of took me off the path, of a normal kid. And, it kind of sucked, when I was a kid, growing up. But like I said, I think there was a silver lining to experiences like that in your life.
Yeah, no doubt. And we all have those kinds of experiences. You're certainly unique in a lot of regards. And one of those is growing up as a brown kid, if you will, in what I
Sure.
suspect was, if not totally, predominantly a white neighborhood. Tell me about the concept of a coconut.
That's what my friends would tease me. But a coconut is basically brown on the outside and white on the inside. And I'm pretty much an American apple pie kid on the inside. But I got a bit of a tan, so look a little different on the outside. And that has I've come to use that to my advantage as I've done a lot of business overseas. But that is the concept of a coconut.
And I appreciate you being open enough to be comfortable with that coming up.
Sure.
But I do want to make just, if you will, a quick editorial comment. And the fact that your father came here from Bombay and that you are 100% American on the inside, whether you're called a coconut or what, I mean, your name is unique. You're certainly in a minority as far as looks, but that's what helps make this country, in my opinion, a great country. It's the diversity of our population. So I just want to make that comment.
Absolutely, totally agree.
So you talked about doing some business overseas. Tell us a little bit about that, because it's your first area of focus in business would never lead someone to expect that your next would be the
Sure. Yeah, so, like I said, grew up in Chicago, went to school at Northern Illinois University, got involved in the tech business for a while, was doing some software startups during the Silicon Alley days in New York City. And then I ended up entering the defense business or the national security business, which is slightly different than what I'm doing now, and was helping develop, create, and sell into international markets for a DARPA-funded national security company out of DC. And we used to sell facial recognition, eye scanning systems, fingerprinting systems, and was doing a lot of selling to a lot of government agencies here in the region for quite a long time.
Yeah, so let me go back to something you said, because I'm unfamiliar with the term, and I suspect many of the listeners are. You said DARPA funded?
Yeah, DARPA is a part of the U.S. military that funds tech companies or other companies that produce IP or technology that would be in the interest of the U.S. government and whatnot. And they've funded things that are related to the internet, to biometrics, and so many things that have come out into the commercial landscape. So a very well recognized organization in the government community.
Okay. Thanks for enlightening me on that as well. So
sure.
I've learned so far about shelf-stable milk and DARPA defense.
Yeah. How many times has that happened in one conversation?
We're well on our way to
I know.
I love it. So help me understand what your role was, who you called on, what your travels were, because I'm a little cloudy, Mustafa, as to the DARPA funding of what I assume to be a commercial company, and who were you selling to?
Yeah, that's a great question. So basically, our company was selling facial recognition systems originally, and then eye scanning systems. These are called biometric technologies. And so what happened is I joined that company literally like 5 or 6 months before 9/11. And when 9/11 happened, it changed the world, right? In fact, I was in New York City at ground zero, 30 blocks away when the first building was hit. So it affected me personally, right? But on the business side, when something like that happened, airport security and identifying travelers coming in and out of borders became very important. And facial recognition and eye scanning and fingerprinting, that technology exploded. And a lot of the governments overseas and the US wanted that to protect their borders. And so to answer your question, what I was doing is I was in a sales role. I've been a salesperson for most of my life. And I started out as an inside salesperson and in that company. And ironically, what happened is there was a conference that our company got invited to in the Middle East, in Dubai. And I was in charge of like a little territory in the US, and the management was like, hey man, who's going to go to Dubai? This guy's name is Mustafa. He's got a tan. Let's send him out there and see what happens. So, I'm this young kid. I've never really traveled overseas. I don't know what Dubai. I'd been to India when I was a kid to visit my relatives. So I was super excited, and I went, and I think I was always a natural, salesperson, or a good communicator. Met the folks there, structured a couple deals, and built a sizable pipeline in the Middle East from we started with one conference in Dubai for the company. And then, to answer your question, I ended up becoming the salesperson in charge of this new business P&L in the Middle East and Europe, and I grew it to be quite a sizable part of their business.
Wow. Well, congratulations on that. And you talked about the whole coconut thing turning out to be an advantage. And
that's where it became an advantage. Yeah, that's where it became an advantage.
Explains it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Without getting into detail of the company, because that's not important to me, but I am curious to what size company, what was the structure of the company? Would it be called a big company? Is it a corporation?
Yeah.
What type of environment was it?
Yeah, so I would say it was a smaller company that got rolled up into a bigger company. So I was at the facial recognition company. There was an ex-Lockheed Martin M&A executive by the name of Bob LaPenta, who came in and merged all the fingerprinting and the iris scanning and the facial recognition company, and merged them all together. And he, on the first week, he interviewed all of the salespeople across all three companies, and I was the Middle East guy. And he was so impressed with me that he gave me the whole portfolio, and that was a really great experience. I worked with some very interesting people at that company. The new board was, folks like George Tenet, Louis Freeh, Admiral Loy, who used to run the National Guard. They helped introduce me to a lot of government, influencers here in this region. And it really showed me, how the world works, from a national security standpoint, a government standpoint. I learned quite a lot during that period.
It sounds like it was destiny in the making, and it sounds like you had a tremendous future there. Let me ask you this: when you were in that role, or that series of roles, if you will, that evolution in that business, did you consider yourself at all, or did you have any entrepreneurial urges or driving, or were you just thinking, hey, I'm a salesperson, or I'm an employee?
Yeah. What's interesting is during that period in my life, I was in my 30s, right? And I was a professional, and I was in this, government sort of space, and there were some cool things about it, like who I was talking to, who I was selling to. I got to fly business class and go to the cheese parties and all that kind of stuff. And to be quite honest, back then, my goal, I think, was, when I look back at it now that I've been past my midlife crisis, I think it was a bit immature. I think it was a bit more materialistic. It was a bit more money focused, at that time. And that was kind of common in that environment or in that circle. And I think that evolved and changed as I grew as a person, and as I jumped from the professional world to the entrepreneurial world, which are two different worlds.
Mm-hmm. So I'll plant the seed now. We'll come back to it in a bit, but I am very curious to learn, in your experience, the common traits from when you were not as entrepreneurial focused, when you were kind of riding the wave and enjoying life, and, as you said, being a bit maybe immature, but I'm not sure that's the right word. We can say that as we look back, but you were being a 30-year-old kid in a powered, high professional situation. When and how did you end up moving full-time to Dubai? What was that transition?
Sure.
And how did your family come into that?
Sure. So I ended up moving from New York City to London because the international business had taken off, and that was both in the Middle East and Europe. And I was creating a lot of that proprietary deal flow back then, and I really had picked up a good knack for it. And then what ended up happening is, at that time, the business in the Middle East grew so much that I ended up proposing to my company that was based in the US and said, hey, instead of flying me there every month, it's probably cheaper if you just move me to Dubai. And I live there, you give me a relocation package, you don't have to pay for all these expensive plane tickets, and I'll be closer to the customer. And I personally wanted to move there because when I got married, the mother of my children, her family was, from that region too. So and I always wanted to go to Dubai. I just thought it was a great place. And I just had my first child, Serena, was born in London, and when she was born, literally a month later, we shipped her to Dubai. And so to answer your question, I sort of proposed to my company to shift from New York to London and London to Dubai, and then ended up having 2 more kids there and been there for the last 15 years now.
Well, that all turned out really well. And just as an aside, you've got an absolutely beautiful family, Mustafa.
Thank you.
You and your wife and your 3 children are just a
Thank you.
beautiful family. Dubai, a little bit different than London, and certainly different than New Jersey and Chicago. When you were in Dubai, you started having thoughts of doing something different.
Yeah.
That professional evolution, share with us what that was all about.
Yeah, so, I think for the longest time, I always had that entrepreneurial bug. I always wanted to start something. I think I had, being, an Indian, being around folks in Dubai, a lot of the families here are very entrepreneurial, have their own family businesses. And I really enjoyed watching how businesses were passed down from generation to generation. And so what happened with me is I evolved as a person, right, personally, and I think that influenced my jump from professional life to entrepreneurship. And I think that if I really think about it hard, I had 3 kids, and it just would have made me so proud to be able to pass something down to my kids, to pass a company down to my kids. I always wanted I have 2 daughters and a son. I always wanted my 2 daughters to work, not have to be, in the workforce and have the option of working at their family company. But I think the real core to entrepreneurship is I wanted freedom, and no matter how much money you're getting paid, no matter if you're a VP title or even a CEO at a big company, you don't have financial freedom is one thing, but you don't have freedom in the sense that you call the shots, right? And I think that I always wanted that. I was always a little different from when I was a kid. I was different from everyone else, and I felt a little confined maybe. And so I when I think about it, I think that's what made me jump into entrepreneurship. It wasn't just financial, and it wasn't just all these other things. Now, obviously, I saw the opportunity. I wanted to get out. The couple other notes I would say is, the defense business is very cyclical. You've got a Republican or a Democrat in the White House, and you got these folks running these countries, and you sell billions of dollars for a few years, and it's very cyclical depending on the politics. Real estate is very cyclical. Luxury goods, all the. What I liked about the food business is I'd seen families with the food business, and the food business is slow money. You kind of grow like this, and if there's a downturn, it's kind of like this, but it doesn't put a lot of stress on the family. So I was also thinking about that when I had this vision of I want to pass something on to my kids. I don't want something that's going to stress them out so much. And CPG or FMCG is something that everyone can kind of relate to. So those are a whole array of personal, opportunistic, and different factors that kind of made me jump into that world.
Okay, you threw out a couple of terms. I'm going to ask you to elaborate just briefly to explain to the listeners. CPG, consumer product goods, and
FMCG. So CPG and FMCG, kind of the same thing, but they just mean fast-moving consumer goods. So like food is a CPG, soaps, Coca-Cola, Gatorade, all those things are those types of products. Yeah.
Yeah. Or in my background, beer and
Anheuser-Busch. Yeah, you got it.
Maybe not as fast in Dubai, but yeah.
It's a fast-moving product. So
yeah, it is. So I know that you didn't just sit back one day and say the defense industry has been fun, but it's time to get into milk. I love how the genesis of that idea came to be. Talk to us a little bit about your travels back home to see your family, and then bringing food products back with you.
Yeah, a lot of people are like, how do you go from defense to milk? You know, and it had, again, there were a lot of personal factors and opportunistic business factors too. So on the personal side, you know, I'm a father of 3 kids, right? And as you may know, folks from Dubai during the summer, you know, in July, it's, you know, 150 degrees. So people get out of Dodge and they want to go to the US or go to Europe, you know. So I, every summer was going back, you know, this is 10, 15 years ago, going back to the US. I go to Whole Foods and I, you know, wherever, and my kids would just drink so much organic Valley and Horizon, organic chocolate milks. They eat these Cliff bars, and there was so much variety for healthy food. And, you know, I'm a very healthy living kind of person. I'm working out 3-4 days a week, doing my yoga, Barry's boot camp, all this kind of stuff, eating healthy. So we'd fill our bag, literally, with a suitcase full of like chocolate organic milk and health bars, and then we'd haul it over to Dubai, and my kids would just scream through that in like, you know, a week or two, and we're out of stock then. So that really, like, the light bulb went off, and I said, you know, there's got to be an opportunity. Organic milk wasn't really readily available 8 years ago. There was only one brand and one SKU, one product. You know, it was a low-fat, semi-skimmed milk from France with no vitamins and horrible packaging, and it was just a big company with no connection to the community. So
you're talking about in Dubai, excuse me, but you're talking about in Dubai.
In Dubai, yeah.
Yes. Okay.
And so, which is totally opposite of the variety and the quality that we're seeing in Europe and in the US. So we saw an opportunity. There was something missing in the market.
Right. So pursuing that, I know you did a lot of research, and what I find in my research and trying to learn more about you and your company and your product is that all of your milk is Italian sourced.
Yeah.
Why Italy?
Yeah, so that's a very customer driven decision that we made. And so one thing that we did early on, which I think has been one of our biggest reasons for success, is before we sourced or productized or came up with what we were going to do, we interviewed around 1,000 mothers around the region. So we did a lot of proprietary primary research, and we listened. You know, we listened to the market, and we heard mothers saying that, look, we want organic milk. The number one application is for kids. You know, the taste profile, the shelf life. We want vitamin D in our milk. We want whole fat milk. We don't want any plastic straws because it's bad for the environment. The source, you know, there isn't a lot of natural arable land, you know, in this region. So they were more comfortable with sources from Europe and from the United States. And so to answer your question, why Italy, we had all this proprietary primary research, and the consumer was saying, we trust and want, you know, a European standard milk that tastes great. The reason we picked Italy specifically is that in our research and our travels, you know, I traveled to like 20 different countries looking for the best organic milk in the world. And we weren't looking for the cheapest organic milk, we're looking for the best organic milk. And what we realized is that there's a couple factors. One, what do the cows eat? 2, how do the cows feel? And 3, how do you pasteurize the milk? And Italian soil determines the quality of grass. It determines the quality of Italian oats, Italian almonds, Italian soy for the plant-based. So because Mount Vesuvius exploded in Italy, the land is very nutrient rich. The cows eat great grass. I've never tasted the grass myself, but that's what the cows tell me. And the cows are like, you know, grazing under the Italian Alps. They probably have a better view than I do here in Dubai. And then we've learned how to pasteurize the milk in a unique way that retains its taste and nutrients. So that's how we chose Italy. And those are some of the factors that we used in choosing Italy.
Is that at all limiting?
So it depends, but as of right now, Italy can produce enough organic milk that I can sell now. And even if I, you know, multiply times 10 or 20, I'm still okay on that source. Yeah. You know, if I have that problem where I need more milk, then I'm in a good place, you know.
Okay, well that's good to know, especially since Koita is growing so dramatically. Now, one of the elements of your success, you talked about your proprietary research, and that it was done basically by you conducting it in basically coffees with moms.
Yeah. So we did a lot of proprietary primary research, and I was personally involved. Look, we didn't have a lot of money, right? We were broke back then. You know, I had my life savings, $200,000 to start the whole company. So we couldn't hire big research firms or buy proprietary research or anything. We had to do it on our own, you know. So we started out asking friends to get, 10 moms together. We'd buy them coffee, give them some, samples to taste. We did a lot of Facebook polling back then when Facebook was sort of new. Facebook polling was new. A lot of email stuff. Called a lot of people. Back then, everyone was using Skype. Remember Skype video? So I actually was in all of those myself, and I heard the information I could feel what people were saying myself. And I still do that to this day. 8 or 9 years later, we still do proprietary primary research every year to find out what the next new thing is, because we're very customer driven.
Which I think is anyone that wants to get into any kind of business or provide any kind of service absolutely has to embrace the voice of the customer. And we talked a little bit before recording about the premise of the go-giver, and that's the whole thing. How do you provide more in value than you take in payment? And that requires knowing what the customer wants and needs. But you also touched on something just now that is also equally, to me, unique and fascinating, and that is you are 100% self-funded.
Yeah.
That was a decision.
Yes, it was a decision, and it was a tough decision. And I think that, look, it's funny, I'm wearing a shirt that says freedom right now. So I guess that's the theme. I didn't do that on purpose, but, I wanted the freedom to control my destiny and my decisions as much as possible. The other thing you got to realize is that the number one advantage to smaller companies that are growing is agility, right? And the more people you have involved, to a certain extent, investors or other companies, it slows down your decision making and your adaptability and ability to pivot. Also, the other advantage of not having funding is that sometimes companies that get the VC and PE have to artificially grow so fast, and that hurts their go-to-market capability. We've launched into very large markets, and we don't need to be in 1,000 stores. We're okay with 100 stores, and we rather grow slowly, and that's a lot more sustainable than launching across 1,000 stores. And we can make less expensive mistakes and then grow, in a better way. So the reason for self-funding is personal, but I think it's also, it creates, I think, a smarter business environment by default. Now, I don't have the fancy private jet or, the big offices or, I can't pay myself as much as I want to. So there are pros and cons, but in the beginning, I didn't have as much of a choice. As soon as we hit cash flow neutral or cash flow positive, and, we could sustain hiring, some of the very intelligent people I've been lucky enough to retain and attract and retain. Then I made a decision that, hey, I made it this far. I don't want any more funding. I want to try and self-fund it and grow slower and smarter.
Yeah, and that's a real important point to elaborate on, certainly on my show, on this podcast, because What's the Point is all about why do people do what we do? What drives us? What is our purpose? What's our goal? And we use that to ignite our passion. And so one of the things that is really impressive to me about you, Mustafa, and your approach to business is you made the conscious decision going into this that you wanted a lifestyle business as opposed to chasing profits, as opposed to getting into a business where your first goal is just money, money, money. How do you define lifestyle business, and how did you come to that decision?
Yeah, so I can't say I came to that decision because I was a smart enough guy to say, this is what I want. I think I kind of stumbled upon it a little bit, because in the beginning, when you start in the company, you don't even have time to think about what you want, right? You're just like trying to survive. You're just trying not to die, right, in the beginning, because I knew I wanted to start something. But once I started, getting a foundation in place and attracting the right people and getting some small wins, I really started enjoying the lifestyle, And I think, to me, being content with my own life is what makes me happy.
Mm-hmm.
And then it makes me happy when I can provide that to other people, and that comes in two main forms. It comes in the form of my own employees, which, we have now 30 employees, and I'm so lucky to have these 30 employees with me. They're amazing. And they've all been with me for a long time, and I feel like they're my family. I feel like I'm responsible. I work for them. I want to make them happy the way I feel happy sometimes. Don't get me wrong, when you're the CEO, sometimes you're not happy because there's some, the shit hits the fan every once in a while. And then the other part to that is I want to make my consumers happy, right? So when lactose-free milk, for example, solves a medical issue. A lot of kids, my son has lactose problems. He gets bloating and he can't enjoy dairy, and our lactose-free milk allows him to enjoy dairy and the protein value and the portability of it and all that kind of stuff. And so when I get a small note from a mom saying, my kid could not drink milk until you had it. So those are things that just make me so happy because they're getting so happy. So that's hopefully that answers kind of like what I think right now is the vision, or what I define as a good lifestyle and who I'm trying to make happy. It's not just myself anymore.
That was a brilliant answer, and it's a brilliant philosophy, which is why I wanted to touch base on it. And just two things. The other thing that you talked about earlier in our conversation today, Mustafa, is that you wanted something that would be or could be transferable to your children as they grew older. So that's part of the lifestyle equation as I see it. But there's so much talking to you. The regular listeners know that I'm a Go-Giver coach and speaker. And, in the first Go-Giver book, when Joe, the subject, meets Pindar, the mentor, what he said is, boy, she could make a killing selling that coffee. And the mentor Pindar goes, does it make money is not a bad question. It's just a bad first question. And the first question is, who do we serve and how? And that's your focus. What you just explained is exactly that philosophy, bringing value to people, filling their need, and making a very successful business as a result. So I applaud you for both your motivation, but also for discovering the niche that is perfect for you.
Thank you.
So now it's getting exciting because you're making inroads into your home country of the U.S.
Yeah, it is very exciting. I got to tell you, I mean, my father, on a slight side note, he never really knew what I was doing, because I was overseas. He's in Chicago and he's old school, 75 now. And I would send him a picture here and there. But now it's like, we just got some product, on Amazon, and we're going to soon get product into some of the retailers, and he sees it there. And he's like, oh, now I know what you do. He has to see it, And, there are obviously some old high school ex-girlfriends that, might come across the pack here on a shelf or two. And that's always great for my ego, for them to see a Koita Milk pack. And so I'm trying to make sure I find out where they live and to put those packs just in the right places. But
there you go. Ego is a terrible thing.
Yeah, exactly. But it's really, and personally, one of my children is in the United States. The second one's going to end up going to school there too. So, it's a personal thing to be able to go back to my home country and show this. I'm so proud of a Dubai brand starting and going to 10 countries and then ending up back in my hometown. That's a really cool thing.
Yeah, it is. And for the listeners that want to explore this product, and it's a fabulous product, and you have, 30 or 40 SKUs now, different flavors and sizes and such. But before you answer that, anyone listening that wants to explore this can go to Koita, Koita, Koita.com. And or you can go to the world's biggest retailer, Amazon.com, and search for Koita on there as well.
Sure.
But hey, it's what we do these days. So tell us about your product line.
So the product line that's available overseas is an organic dairy product line and an lactose-free dairy line. And then when I say dairy, from cow milk. And that's where we started. But where the highest growth market is in our plant-based milks. And that's a new trend. People are moving from dairy to plant. And so we have an amazing set of Italian almond milk, Italian oat milk, Italian rice milk, coconut milk. They're produced in Italy, but the coconuts come from Thailand. And then we've got some small packs, big packs. We're very proud to say that our plant milks are on Emirates Airlines on 167 flights a day. They're in some of the finest hotels around the world, like the Four Seasons. They're at Barry's Boot Camp. They're on Amazon here in the region and also in the US. And that's what we've launched in the United States, is the Italian plant milks. And they're really getting a lot of fanfare. The Wall Street Journal just wrote an article about our plant milks. We won a couple of awards. So that's the line that I've been focusing a lot of my time on. Which is great. And Harvard Business School did a case study on you, yes? Yeah. That's one of our, that's one of my proudest moments, because about 3-4 years ago, I was taking a Harvard executive MBA course, and there was a professor. Her name was Professor Linda Applegate. She's amazing. She's got more energy than 100 batteries. And so she started the HBS entrepreneurship program. She used to work in the White House. And so I was like the kid after class bugging Linda with questions. And she's kind of like looking at me like, what does this guy do? And I told her about my story and how we bootstrapped this company in the emerging markets and how we're taking on these billion-dollar dairy and plant-based milk companies and beating them. And so she's like, wow, this is amazing. Could I write a case study about you? And I was like, I really had to, I think I had to look over my shoulder. I was like, are you talking to me? And so she sent a case study writer from Boston to interview all of our employees, all of our customers in Singapore, Saudi Arabia, Mauritius, everywhere, and interviewed our social media influencers, because we were one of the first companies that really used and embraced social media 8-9 years ago in the region. And then they were teaching it in the class. So I think just before COVID, I was invited as a guest speaker with my kids. I brought my kids, and I swear for the first time ever, my daughter Serena was like, yeah, Dad, you're kind of cool now. I made her cool list. And that was the only time I think my daughter thought I was cool. But I'm really, and they teach it even now every year. Like during COVID, they taught a HBS online class, and I think when things open up, we'll go back there. But that's a really great accolade, and we're very proud that Harvard recognized us. Yeah, and it really validates your approach to the business and how you have stuck with it, which brings me to another question. Again, regular listeners know that I purport the purpose principle, where we have to know our purpose to really get going, because that then will ignite our passion, which will let us give our best effort to that. But the third element of that, the third P, if you will, is persistence. How has it been for you, Mustafa, to stick through some of the rough times, to stick through some of the, man, am I going to make it? Am I going to feed my family? Did you ever think of quitting? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Jumping from the professional world, when you've got a steady paycheck and you're flying business class and your kids' tuition is paid for, to the world of entrepreneurship where nothing is known and there's a lot of uncertainty, and you have to learn how to deal with failure and embrace it, and you're scared, and I think I got through it through two ways, right? I think the first way is, I think back in my childhood, because I had, a lot of challenges during my childhood, I was the odd kid out. I came from a family, where my dad had to remarry, and stepbrothers and stepmom, and mom passing and everything. I had to go through a lot of adversity, and I built up a lot of grit, and persistence. And I learned from a young age that because I was put in really challenging situations, if I kept trying and knocking on that door, eventually it would open, right? And so that DNA, kind of went through my whole life. I was always persistent as a salesperson, persistent when I was trying to build relationships with people that I wanted to build relationships with. And so that was part one. Part two, I think, is that when I started the company, I was lucky enough not to create these ostentatious goals. I don't believe in the philosophy of go big or go home. I really believe in small experimentation and building small steps. And so what happened is you have a feeling of excitement and a feeling of nervousness when you start, right? And it's 90% nervous and 10% excitement. And then you get a small win. You win, you get a meeting with someone, or you convince one small store to list you. And then it's like you're 20% excited and 80% nervous. And then, you get your PR person gets you in the Gulf News or or this thing, and you get some sales, right? And then, so slowly you build your confidence up, and that takes a combination of persistence. But so I guess my answer to you is it's a little bit of inbuilt, childhood stuff that I think messes with all of us, both good and bad. And it's the idea of experimentation and growing smart and slow, and being persistent.
Well, and that says a whole lot, and I appreciate your openness and transparency on that, because admitting that we have fear isn't something that necessarily comes natural to humans, but in particular as testosterone-driven men.
I'm still scared today. I mean, I'm scared even today. I think it's normal.
Well, I think that's true for all of us. But again, to be able to acknowledge that and embrace that and make a key point that we're going to have failures, we're going to have disappointments, but the key is, we can mope for a little bit. I might mope a little bit more than the average person, but the key is to say, what's the lesson there? Because there's something we've learned, and there's something that can teach us what not to do or what we can do to move forward and better reaching our goal. And speaking of your goal, one of the things I love that I read about you is when you say our vision is to make sure everyone can eat good, because when you eat good, you feel good, which makes you want to do good. It's brilliant. I love it.
Yeah. I have to give some credit. The source of that was right from my heart, but obviously, my marketing and copywriting people, Nishita Shah, who's in charge of my marketing, she made me sound a lot cooler than what it was. But yeah, that's really the premise. And I think that I just wanted to highlight one thing that you brought up right now that I think is really, really important, is that one of the ways that I've dealt with a lot of adversity, and challenges is you hit the nail on the head, which is when you have failure, the first thing you have to ask is, what did I learn? So that's part one. The second trick that I've used, right, when I'm starting a company or dealing with anything, is I forecast failure, right? So it kind of takes the emotional out of it and makes you more pragmatic. So for example, what I do nowadays, and this is because I've failed so much in my life, is that every year I know there's going to be one catastrophe, right, in my business. Some customer is going to want to delist us, or some container is going to fall off the ship, or some guy's not going to pay me, or something's going to happen bad, right? Every quarter there's going to be a mini problem, and every month there's going to be a monthly problem. Right. So now what happens is, in my mind, when something happens, which is bound to happen in any business, I'm like, oh, this is this month's problem. I label it in my head, and it just de-stresses the whole thing. Or, we got a couple challenges now. As you get bigger, more money, more problems. I got a couple big challenges. So I'm like, oh shit, this is this year's big problem. So that's another little thing that I've used that's helped me kind of get through adversity.
I absolutely love that. It's coming, and when it does, embrace it and say, I was right, it's coming. Now what do we learn? What do we do? That's brilliant.
Yeah,
that's
thanks.
Brilliant. So I appreciate your time. I know it's very late for you there. And so I appreciate you. Of course, it's the life of the entrepreneur. You can always chalk it up to that, but still, it's very generous of you to give your time, especially as late at night as it is in Dubai now as we record. So we've covered a lot of ground. We've covered you being a young boy in New Jersey and Chicago, a young coconut, and going to Northern Illinois University, becoming a Husky, and then somehow finding your way into the defense industry, and then into milk and your beautiful family. And we've covered a lot, and what you've done in your life and what you represent in your life is very rich and full. But as we look back at that, here's the question I hope you knew was coming. And it's very simple, Mustafa. What's the point?
Well, I was listening to some of your other podcasts, so I had a feeling it was coming. Well, to answer that question, I will preface it and say that, I think my point has evolved, as I've learned more about myself and what I'm all about. And I think when I was younger, my point was different, but as of right now, I want to be content. I want to be happy. And I want other people to feel that same feeling. And I think that starts with my family and my extended families, my employees, and my consumers. I want them to feel that. And that's really the point for me right now. It might change in a couple of years, but as of today, that's what it is.
Thank you. I appreciate that answer. And I am so grateful to have heard it, because the one thing that I want people listening to understand very clearly, we have a purpose, but as soon as we know what it is, things change. Our life changes, the environment changes, the family or business environment. There are so many different factors. Our purpose will evolve. So yes, when you say your answer to what's the point now is different than it would have been 20 years ago, of course it is. And it's going to be different 20 years from now. It's going to be different maybe in a week, at least slightly adjusted. And that's what we have to understand, is we have to be open to pursuing our purpose, but understanding that we have to accommodate the fact that it's going to evolve, because we grow. And if it's not evolving, and if we're not evolving, then we're not growing and we're staying stagnant. So your answer is absolutely spot on. Mustafa Koita, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you. I can't wait to sample some of your milk. I've seen it on a lot of Emirates flights. I'm not in the mood for milk when I'm flying, sorry. I wish you the very best of success. And again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Bill. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks so much for tuning in. And if you like what you heard, please subscribe so you don't miss an episode. We can promise you'll gain value in every one. Rating and reviewing makes us more discoverable and helps others find out what's the point. And if you'd like to know more about Bill Ellis or contact him, please visit his website, www.brandingpillars.com. See you next time.